3 citizens attended, including in addition, Commissioner Cosby. There was discussion of the usage of the dwelling currently under construction. Citizens were supportive of this request. Staff recommends the standard conditions for this use, that being that this use is a detached accessory family housing unit, that it be limited to only the family of the principal dwelling unit residents, that it shall not be rented separately, that the applicants will provide a working carbon monoxide and smoke detectors in the dwelling, and that the applicants will provide emergency access to such dwelling. Staff recommends a 5-year expiration period. And lastly, staff has included our standard transfer and lease language. And I'd be willing to take your questions at this time.
When we do these sort of things, is 5 years always the recommended?
Initially, yes.
For the initial CUP? Thank you.
So,
Sorry, go ahead.
my understanding is, and I apologize, I was there, I was at the meeting, but it was a while ago. So the garage unit is currently under construction or already built?
Building permit has been issued for that building. It has not been completed, though.
Okay. So no one currently is living on that property because that's not completed in the larger residence, it's not.
Has not been issued a building permit because requires this conditional use permits. Nobody is residing on the property.
Any other questions? Thank you. Would the applicant like to speak?
Good evening. For the record, my name is Kevin Roderick. Thank you, Mr. Ellis and the commission for hearing us out.
Your address, please, as well.
I'm sorry?
Your address, please. As well.
My current address, we live in Manassas.
Okay.
It's 6683 Foxton Road, Manassas, Virginia. And in 2001, my wife and I came down to Richmond in search of a piece of property to perhaps retire to. We fell in love with Goochland County, ended up buying the property in question. And our intent was to build our primary residence and then at some future point build a shop and an accessory dwelling unit. Unfortunately, for her parents or my parents, who at the time were still living, in 2022, my father-in-law passed away. And that kind of shifted our priorities a little bit, and we decided to proceed with the shop and the in-law suite. And my mother-in-law sold her home in April of this year, and for tax purposes, and she's living with us currently. And the plan is that in September, when the property is, the building is complete, that she would move in, and that would be her primary residence. At that time, we would, upon approval of the CUP, we would begin construction of our primary residence. So that's all I had. Any questions?
Thank you. Any questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I will now open up for public comment. Okay, we'll close public comment. I move that the commission recommend approval of conditional use permit CU 2024-00011 for a detached accessory family housing unit at 494 Broad Street Road, subject to the imposed conditions as presented.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion is passed.
The motion to recommend approval passes on a 5-0 vote. This case will be scheduled for public hearing before the Board of Supervisors on August the 6th with a recommendation of approval from the Planning Commission. District 1, CU 2024-12, application by Pleasant Grove Farm LLC requesting a conditional use permit, CUP, for an unhosted short-term rental and public assembly place, and for a paved parking waiver on 103.92 acres at 4615 Old Fredericksburg Road on tax map number 610620. The property is zoned agricultural general A1. The CUP is required by the County Zoning Ordinance, Section 15102, in accordance with Section 15285G and 15290. The comprehensive plan designates this area as a rural enhancement area.
Thank you, Ms. Morton. Members of the commission, Tom Coleman, Principal Planner. As Ms. Morton indicated, this next application is a conditional use permit application seeking two uses, a public assembly place and an unhosted short-term rental. This is located in the northwestern part of the county. The subject property is located about a mile sort of west-northwest of the I-64 Old Fredericksburg Road interchange. That's the interchange that has the Goochland Drive-In Theater on one quadrant. Between the subject property and the interchange includes a Midpoint Industrial Park and a site that was approved for the HG Meats processing facility. The subject property does have residential neighborhoods, rural residential neighborhoods to the north, and one that sort of wraps around to the east and to the south, Haynesville Farms. And look at their photo, sort of see that the subject property does include some cleared areas that really lend it to farming, and there are also some forested uses towards the southern portion of the property. But generally, the area does reflect sort of a rural residential, sort of rural character. Look at subject property is zoned agriculturally, and the surrounding properties are also zoned agriculturally. And looking at the comprehensive plan map, you do see some industrial zoning between the subject property and the interstate that's related to the Midpoint Industrial Park. And that's also reflected on the comprehensive plan. The subject property and the surrounding properties are designated as rural enhancement areas, but there are some recommendations for some industrial that's associated with Midpoint Industrial Park and some undeveloped commercial area, again, in close proximity to the interchange. Looking at the property, the predominant feature is the main house. It's the two dwellings are both constructed in the 1800s. This main house is about 4,900 square feet. It does include a large outdoor porch and patio area and a fire pit to the rear of the site. Also in close proximity to the house, there is that sort of a barn workshop. It's a two-story structure. It's about 1,400 square feet, and it's sort of a shed located behind that. And as we get into the conceptual plan, the public assembly place will be in close proximity and right behind these structures. There's a guest house that's located more towards the southern piece of the property. It's about 1,100 square feet. The applicants indicated that as part of the short-term rental of the main house, that they would stay in the guest house while guests are lodging in the main house. What we don't have pictures of are the public assembly facilities. In the short term, they do intend to have tents as they start their operations, but the long-term plan is to construct an open sort of timber frame structure or pavilion that would be about 2,400 square feet in size and have an occupancy of about 150. So you have to kind of use your imagination for those items. Looking at the conceptual plan, what I've tried to do is highlight in red some of the existing structures. That's where the main house is located. There is that barn and shed you showed earlier, and then the guest house located further south on the property. And then sort of in blue would be sort of the impacted site, the development areas. They do have that area. They would start out for tents, but eventually they would construct a pavilion in that area, and then an area where their parking and their overflow parking would be located. In operating their public assembly use, this is sort of what they put forth as their operations, that they wanted to have a max of 200 guests. They wanted to have 34 events per year, recognizing that some of those events might have a secondary kind of access use, like maybe somebody has a wedding, they might also have a rehearsal party or something like that. I'll go over that again in more detail with the CUP conditions. But they did want to basically have like about 150 events or less, about 32 times per year, but twice a year they did want to go above 150 and go to that 200. and again, that'll be reflected in the conditions. The conceptual plan did show that location for the tents in the short term and the future pavilion. They wanted to provide about 50 parking spaces, preferably gravel, at their initial startup. 9 to 11 would be their operations, and all of the services, the food service, entertainment, porta potties, et cetera, would be brought to the site and removed from the site for each event. As far as the short-term rental, as alluded to earlier, they do not have to have a CUP for a hosted short-term rental, but their intent is to get approval for the unhosted short-term rental at the main house, and with that approval, they could reside, or they indicated they would stay in that guest house in the rear of the property when guests are staying in the main house. They also have indicated that they want to operate a number of farm-related activities, agribusiness or agritourism, things like pick your own farm operation, some educational activities. So they do plan on there other activities on site, but those are allowed by right and don't require a conditional use permit. And they've also, there's some ponds with docks on the property, and they've talked about maybe installing some walking trails and bike trails and things like that. Again, those types of uses would not require CUP. Just a little bit of information about the closest dwellings. Again, you can kind of see where some of the fair amount of the property is cleared and would lend itself to the farming and farm-related activities. The closest structures are actually to the north across Fredericksburg Road, about 900 feet, and then immediately to the west, about 700 feet due west of their activity area, about 1,500 to the south, and then about 1,100 to the east. There was a community meeting in April. There were 12 attendees, including Supervisors Christie and Lyle. There are a number of questions and items that were discussed at that meeting, including the applicant's plans on how they plan to market the property, the types of activities they plan for the property, potential groundwater impacts, the locations of those trails I mentioned earlier, and the possibility of motorized vehicles on the trails, hosting multiple events at once. You'll note that there was the potential noise about shooting. At the community meeting, the applicant did talk about the potential for maybe doing a fire range, maybe for doing a day camp, but they ultimately did not include those in their application. So you'll see reference to that in the community meeting, but it's not a part of the application. I will say that the attendees at the meeting were generally supportive of the application. As we get into the CUP conditions, there are a number of conditions. I won't read through most of them, but we'll touch base on them. The first one would require them to have internal access that meets the Goochland Fire Rescue and Department of Community Development requirements. The second one would prohibit parking on Old Fredericksburg Road. The third one would prohibit fireworks. The fourth would prohibit hunting or firearms by guests. Fifth one is our standard condition regarding the transfer or lease of the property. And the last one is the expiration date of August 2029. We get into the next set of conditions. These really apply more specifically to the public assembly place. Number 7 does allow that place of public assembly on the property. Number 8 would require them to generally adhere to that conceptual plan showed you earlier. Number 9 would require any new structures to sort of retain or exhibit a rural or farm character or resemble one of the existing structures that have already been built on site. Number 10, that would require them to get all of their necessary approvals before operating the public assembly place activity. Number 11 would require them to provide a minimum of 38 parking spaces and to provide overflow parking. They are requesting a paved parking waiver. So number 12 would give them a paved parking waiver, except for handicap parking. Handicap parking must be paved. Number 13 would limit them to an annual of 34 the public assembly place activities per year. Number 14, it would generally limit them to 150 people per activity, but it would allow them to twice a year to go between 150 and 200 attendees at an event. The hours of operation, it's Friday and Saturday, would be 9 to 11 with sound or amplified sound ceasing at 10 o'clock. Sunday would be 11 to 10 with the amplified sound ceasing at 9 o'clock. And then there would be no events held Monday through Thursday. Generally, the amplified sound outdoors, they could have amplified sound inside a structure or inside a tent or something that has flaps on it, but outside of that, the only amplified sound they could have outdoors would be associated with a wedding. The number 17 regarding tents, the applicant did state their intent to have tents in their early operations. This would require those tents, if they're installed, to be taken down within 7 days of the event's conclusion. Number 18 would limit them to one sign. Number 19, if they install any outdoor lighting, they would be required to get a lighting plan for that. Number 20 is our standard condition regarding uniform security as it relates to these public assembly place locations. Number 21, again, a standard condition as it relates to serving and consuming alcohol as it relates to those public assembly activities. Number 22 would require the annual notice. Now, as we move into the next set, these are more geared towards the short-term rental unhosted part of the CUP. The first one, number 23, would allow the short-term rental to take place. Number 24 would limit their maximum occupancy to 10 people. Number 25 would require the carbon monoxide and the smoke detector to be installed. Again, the 26 would limit their amplified sound and really allow no outdoor music after 10 o'clock. Number 27 does require them to install no trespassing signs to make sure their guests are aware of the property boundaries. And number 28 would require them to provide notice to their guests of 4 specific conditions that we've mentioned. That would include the limit of 10 people, the no amplified sound outdoors, and no music at all outdoors after 10 o'clock, observing the no trespassing signs, and the no hunting or discharging of firearms on the property. And that concludes our presentation. I'd be happy to try to answer any questions.
So you said there's surface water ponds on the property. Is there any restrictions, are they under any restrictions or obligations to fence that or somehow?
I mean, I'm not aware of any restrictions on that. I mean, maybe I don't know if the applicant has any more information on that.
All right. And the guests that go to the edge of the property, there will be signs there that allow them to know where the next property starts?
I'm sorry, as it relates to the signs, they're
Yeah, no trespassing signs. Those are intended to keep guests
on the property,
on that
correct.
property.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because typically with the STR, those might be, with the unhosted, they would be unsupervised, and that's just to try to make sure that they stay on the property.
Right. Okay, thanks.
So you had mention of possible motorized travel around the trails, maybe?
Yeah, I could defer to the applicant to talk a little bit about more what their vision is for the property and what their vision is for those bike trails on the property. So those would not be regulated by the CUP, so they would be allowed to do that.
Okay, got it.
What is considered, how long is the short-term rental?
Short-term rental, is it 30 days? 30 days or less.
So are they marketing this as Airbnb?
I mean, I think they indicated it would be on like VRBO or Airbnb, and they can talk a little bit more about how they would plan to market the property.
So it's not just the event that's going on. People could be there outside of the event that's happening.
Could, I mean, as far as the CUP is concerned, they're separate uses and they could occur at the same time.
Okay.
You mentioned their intent was to stay in the guest house if the main house is being occupied.
I'm sorry.
You mentioned that their intent was to stay in the guest house if the main house is being occupied.
Yes, when
It's not being regulated, though.
when people are staying in the main house,
Yeah.
they do have the existing guest house they could stay in.
Right, but it's not being regulated by the CUP.
Right, it would still be, it's still considered unhosted. So being on the property does not constitute hosted.
Okay.
As far as the handicap accessibility, just so I can clarify, it was all, they want the waiver on that, so it doesn't have to be paved except for the handicap spaces?
Correct. Our requirements are that any parking, I think it's over 25, has to be paved. So a lot of times for these kind of the rural activities, actually paving it is less rural in character. So there is this specific provision to allow them to ask for a waiver. So that waiver is included in this request, except for handicap parking. That has to be paved.
And what is the current, floor base of the tent? Is it
sorry.
what is the base of the tent? Is it poured concrete? Is it dirt, or what is?
I would defer to the applicant on
Okay.
that, because we haven't, as far as the CUP concerned, we haven't dug into that. Certainly when they provide their site plans and their building plans, we're going to get more detail on that, but they may have some more insight on that,
Okay,
what their vision for that is.
okay.
So I don't know if you can go back, 'cause I don't know how far you have to go back. In terms of the screen, it showed the parking, it said 38 spaces. So additional parking, if you could go back to that screen where it showed the parking, I think in blue, where would the additional parking be? I think, go back one. Yeah, that one.
We didn't specifically show the overflow parking on here, or that's not here. Typically, the overflow parking is going to be very close proximity to the parking, because they're going to share the same access. So the idea with the overflow parking is it could be grass or something like that. The idea is that it's only going to be used occasionally. I think sort of the vision with this property is the 38 spaces is the code requirement for 30 spaces is for 150 people. And so that, for example, that 150 to 200, that might be two events where they might use their overflow parking. But I mean, it usually abuts the parking area. It's usually in very close proximity.
Thank you. Would the applicant like to speak?
Can both of us speak? You'll speak
Sure,
first?
come on up.
Okay. By the way, could you go back to that image to answer Mr. Crosby's,
Come on up.
my wife is the one who really should be speaking, but if you look at the word parking, the gravel paved parking is on one side and the overflow is on the other.
Okay.
Did you not want to say more? Or?
I'm going to speak after her.
Oh, you
So
can
he
come up
can have the
together.
last
She's
word.
better.
Please state your name and address.
Sherelle McConnell, 4615 Old Fredericksburg Road, Mineral, Virginia. It was a pleasure to recite the Pledge of Allegiance and to participate in a prayer. In the pledge, we said, with liberty and justice for all, and we're here today enjoying some of that liberty of using land in a way that we see is beneficial to our family and to the public. When we came to the property last fall, the Masseys, who own the property, generously have given us the opportunity to try and do something with this land. The family friendship goes back a little ways, and they used to ride dirt bikes together, and so there was a little bit of luck that brought us here. And I'm here for our vision. My husband will do it with the nuts and bolts in a minute, but it's not without emotion that I come today, because I believe that children especially need the opportunity to be outside. Adults have that opportunity at their will. You can go to the beach, you're pretty much free agents in seeking what you want. Children don't always have access to resources. I see this farm as a farm. I know we're here talking about a CUP for events and things like that, but we see it as a place when people drive by. I don't want them to say, oh, that's where Sherelle and Mark live. I want them to drive by the farm and say, that's where we picked berries, or that's where my chickens live, or something that makes this their farm. I want to invite school groups, field trips, people, families, homeschoolers, everybody who stays in the home. We encourage them, please go out, see the forest, walk through, listen to the stream, sit by the lake. We want this to be an immersive experience for everyone who comes in an agricultural setting. 100 acres isn't huge. We're not going to pay this off by selling corn. To live the vision of having people have a rural experience and have this open to the public to participate in agriculture, we need to pay the bills, and that's where the events come in. They provide the income that allows us to have chickens. You know, it's, so as we work through this, hats off to Tom. He's been very patient as I've asked a zillion questions on what we can do and what we can't do and how we can do. And he's called me a dreamer. That's because he's polite. He could have used a few other words. But that is part of the creative process that we're going through. And as my husband explains a few things that we'd like to do, I want in the forefront of this discussion to be our goal to make this agriculture accessible to the public. When you're a huge operation, you're busy farming all the time, and it's hard to cater to individuals. And so this is a rare opportunity. I know there are a number of places, but it's still, the ratio public to farm access is pretty low. And to have something that's close between Charlottesville and Richmond is a great opportunity for people. We're just 1 minute off the interstate. It's so easy for people to get to us and to have a good experience. And that farm experience is really important to us. So from that, I will turn it over to my husband.
My name is Mark McConnell, 4615 Old Fredericksburg Road. So there was a question about motorized on the trails. We're not going to allow that. It's a bike trail. It's a single track, actually. We're about a mile into it. We had a trail designer from Charlottesville who does all of Albemarle County's work come and do a low-impact trail, so to keep erosion down, because I guess that can be bad for the erosion. But anyway, he came and laid out the trail, and we're about a mile into it right now. But it's the thing we do when we are caught up on our chores, which is why we're only a mile into it. Was there another question, Tom, that needed to be addressed by us? There was the parking, the trail, the floor of the tent. So in an ideal world, if we had a ton of money, I would build a beautiful timber frame. I'm an architect. I would build a beautiful timber frame pavilion out there, but we're not. And so the only thing we can really do is level off a place and probably plant grass. And what we were advised to do is to put 21As. I don't know if you're familiar with stones, but it's a stone that has fines in it. So it's a really hard surface, and then scarify it and plant grass. So you really have a really solid surface under the grass. And then when we have enough money to actually build a pavilion, we'll scrape the grass off and pour the concrete there. So that's the idea. And it would be located behind exactly where it is, right next to the handicap parking. I don't want to take up everybody's time. 11 years ago, I renovated this house for Craig Massey. Like Sherelle said, we were probably 12 years old when we used to ride those dirt bikes. And as we laid out the equipment shed and what was a basketball court, which will now be the parking, it was all designed to not be seen from the main house. So it's all behind that barn. So that's why the development is happening right there. It's also pretty far from all of the neighboring properties. So what I wanted to do is, we got this document, the same one that you have, about 48 hours ago, and we would like to propose that you approve an amended, how would you say that? It would be an amended application, because there are a few things that I think we could improve by sort of best practices. And so I have the amended language here. I'm going to hand it out to everybody and walk you through them, if that's all right. Is that okay? Is that?
I don't think it is.
What?
I don't think we can do that.
Okay, so then
I was saying it's up to the chair's discretion. I don't know, are you aware of anything, Tom? Okay,
Okay, I'm wrong. How many things you got?
there are 28 conditions, and we have 4 or 5 that we would like to amend.
All right, let's look at them. Thank you.
Who gets the official record? You, the clerk?
Down there as well.
You know what, you can probably do with one. What?
You have enough. We can share.
Okay, so most of these are just sort of best practices things that we would like to clarify. the way that that number 1 is written, it's pretty unclear about what roads are going to need to be improved. And just to bring this up, very initially, we've been at this since January 4th, we wanted to have a half a dozen little primitive camping spots in the back, just a clear spot for somebody to put a tent on. And then we found out that we would be required to put a 20-foot wide, 80,000-pound road back to those campsites. And obviously, that's ridiculous. It's $100,000. So we understand the intent. And the intent is for fire service people to be able to get as close to where all these people are going to be if there was an emergency, a fire or a heart attack or something like that. So we would like it to just defer to the Virginia statewide fire prevention code, which says it needs to go from a publicly paved road, 20 feet wide, 80,000 pounds, to where a building has been built. So where we're going to build this pavilion, where we're going to build this facility. So we would like the amended language to say, internal access to newly constructed buildings for public assembly shall be constructed and maintained per the Virginia statewide fire protection code. So, because otherwise it doesn't really say which roads we have to improve, and there's no limit on what roads we have to improve. So that's just one clarification, and you can throw it out if you want to, but we thought it would be clearer.
You want us to go one by one?
That's up to you. I don't think staff has seen these before, so it's.
They haven't. I mean, we just got this 48 hours ago.
Yeah, staff might have a recommendation
I'm
to,
not sure we can do it justice like this, because we'll be here for a long time.
Okay.
Going through as many as you have.
Well, let me then just walk you through them and
I hate to do that to you, but.
I know. It's been
we're not
5.5 months.
prepared to see this.
But let me, if we can, I'll just run you through the other things we'd like to change. Requiring us to have our future pavilion look like the other buildings, even the timber frame pavilion, it doesn't look like the other buildings.
Okay.
So that we just want that to be struck. We're going to work really hard. Cheryl didn't mention this, but we go walking with our neighbors 2 days a week. I mean, we have a really good relationship with them, and we want them to be happy. So we're going to restrict our impact on them by this CUP and because we're good neighbors. So, for example, if we're restricting our impact on the neighbors, then why can't we do that on a Tuesday? Why are all of the events clumped on the weekends? Now, sure, I would say, well, Tom has to get up and go to work. Well, yeah, but if we do our job and don't let noise escape our property, Tom can go to sleep. So that's the idea. So, and that's two of these, the next two conditions, number 16 and number 26. It's, as I mentioned, I'm an architect. I've been doing this for 46 years. And I think it's really admirable the way they say, well, if you have tent flaps and you can have that's hard to measure. If the people across the street say it's too loud, then it's too loud. But how loud is that? So what we would recommend is for $200 you can buy a decibel meter and solve all of the conflicts. The idea is that when you get to the edge of our property, it's as quiet as a library. End of story. End of story. Whether we have tents, flaps, a building, amplified music, I do think subwoofers are ridiculous. But we recommend that the sound control be changed to how loud is it? And it's super easy to measure, and best practices sort of all over cities is you take a decibel meter out there, and then the neighbors and the planning staff and you guys, we all know that's too loud.
Sound's a tricky thing, though, because it depends on weather, wind, conditions, et cetera.
Right.
You can travel farther.
Exactly.
Okay.
But the thing is, though, we would be able to stand there on the road, for example, which is like 1,000 feet away, and say, you know what? The wind is blowing and it's too loud. You need to turn that down. As opposed to just saying, well, we have flaps on our tent. So anyway, we would like to do that. And then the other thing is we talked with our neighbors at length we had the public meeting that Tom was at, and then we had another meeting with our neighbors, just to, because the Haydensville Farms, that neighborhood that goes around us, which, by the way, was sold off from this property in 1967, we didn't get to meet all of them. So we had all of those people over, too, and we talked about this issue of guests, particularly on our trail, wandering onto their site. And we talked about no trespassing signs. And they thought that we could probably just have, like Appalachian Trail blazes on the trees and inform them, don't go beyond the blue blazes. Something other, so that nobody has to look at a bunch of no trespassing signs. So those are the things that we'd like you to consider. We were hoping not to defer, because we've been at this for 5.5 months, and it's, this is going to push us back a month.
I understand. They sound sensible. It would, common sense is a good thing. I just don't know if we can pass these.
Well, I think I would like to get input, like, say, from the fire department, and what do they think about this first change? There are things that I would like to get input on, and my question to you would be, would you prefer that we pass this as originally submitted, or would you prefer that we defer and consider a changed application?
Sweetheart?
We're trying to make it,
Yeah, I appreciate you asking.
Well,
That was real.
think about, can you live with these restrictions for the first 5 years? And then it would be up for renewal.
well,
I think we should probably wait. Because if we have an open air pavilion, but still the music is quiet all the way to the property line. So,
we know you
It
want
would delay
the
us
right
a-
thing, we want to do the right thing.
right, I
too,
appreciate
right?
that.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
I think, some of them are very sensible in the decibels and all that stuff. But I mean, the first one, as Guy had said, we can't speak for the fire marshal
Right.
today. And I don't know, that we can vote on that as a part of this CUP.
I also am questioning now, it went from Monday through Thursday, no events, and now it's Monday through Saturday, we're just open.
Yeah, why not?
And that's fine. However, community meeting and, when that was present, they
That was
were-
never discussed, limiting weekday events.
Maybe the planning commission's the one that needs to be answering these questions.
Yeah.
This is a planning.
I'm not
staff.
saying it's not, I.
No, the real
I'm
question
just
is, can we
saying
wait
it's-
another month? I bet we can.
But what happens at that other month is what I'm saying, is that if we don't have interaction and dialogue, we'll end up in the same position
Well,
where.
and in truth, it might be, it might be more than, there might be a new community meeting required. It might actually push it back 3 months. I don't know. What does it do? What
Tom,
does
help
it do?
us.
Tom, help.
What does it do if we
Yeah,
defer?
I think the concerns staff has is that neither staff nor the commission has an opportunity to review these, so we'd want to defer the request to consider these changes. Some of them are problematic, like using decibels. We've gotten away from that. It's just problematic for us to do. It's not one of our standard conditions. And so, I think to consider those, we would recommend deferring to next month.
Now, you say to next month.
In other words,
Could this come back up next month in front of this board, or?
Yeah, absolutely. If the planning commission, if the
They're not-
planning commission defers it,
Would-
then it would come back before the July meeting of the planning commission.
Is there not a need for a new public meeting for some of
If the
these
planning
changes?
commission defers it, it would be deferring it to another public meeting.
Another
You're talking about the
community-
neighborhood meeting.
Another community meeting.
Oh, community meeting.
That's
Sorry.
what I meant. I'm sorry, I used the
No,
wrong word.
no, I'm sorry to be, staff just all of us come up here a little at a time. So Tom's correct, we have not had a chance to actually look at these. Once we really dive into it, if it is something substantially changed than was discussed originally at the planning, at the community meeting, there might be a need for it. Just at quick glance, it's more of a staff and all the other agencies really getting a chance to vet their request, because it really is them requesting that we amend the county's conditions.
If we don't do this tonight, we're not going to vote on this case.
Yeah, if
Or
it
we
is,
can vote on
We
it.
vote on it
and
as
throw this
submitted.
out.
staff is recommending a deferral so that staff can evaluate. At that point in time, we would decide and talk with the applicant whether or not another community meeting would be necessary. As they mentioned, hours of operation were not specifically talked about at the meeting, but it is something that we need to vet through our processes.
Can I ask a quick question about CUPs?
Absolutely.
The first issued CUP is, we've talked about this, it's got some parameters, and then as it gets renewed and no complaints, they've been great citizens, whatever, it kind of expands a little bit. Is the first CUP typically this Friday, Saturday, and Sunday?
It really just depends on what the initial request is, and we kind of take it from there. This was not something that we were aware of that they had a concern with until tonight. So, I mean, it may actually be viable, but it's not necessarily, we can't answer that on the fly at this point in time.
Sure, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kimmerly, for giving us the option, but I think we'd like to defer and let these guys, I think that maybe there's some process opportunities here, because, we got all of the same things that you got 2 days ago. So we really didn't have time to say, whoa, what about this? And like at our community meeting with our neighbors, we talked about the hours of operation, but we never said it would only be on the weekends. So, I do think let's defer.
Okay.
Because I think that it'll end up with a better CUP, more enforceable, clearer for everyone involved.
Thank you.
Commission members, good evening, if I may. Since the applicant is offering a deferral, we could just recognize that, not hold a public hearing, and not have to vote to defer ourselves. We can recognize it as an applicant deferral.
Okay.
All right.
I mean, if you don't want, you can take a motion to defer, but it's going to be recognized as an applicant deferral, which means the timeframes are going to be told, TOLLED, as far as having to act on it. But it will likely come back next month. But we don't have to have a public hearing since the applicant is deferring.
Let's do that.
Okay. And do we usually take a motion, Ms. Parker, when to acknowledge the applicant deferral? Okay, so a motion would be in order to acknowledge the applicant's deferral.
So I'll make a motion that it's an applicant deferral.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I'm sorry.
Aye.
No, there's nothing to read because, yeah, we're just
Okay.
recognizing it.
Okay, motion and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion is passed, or deferred.
The applicant for case CU 2024-00012 Pleasant Grove has requested a deferral to the July 18, 2024 Planning Commission meeting. The request requires a motion and, did the vote. Thank you. Case 2024-00012 Pleasant Grove is deferred for July 18, 2024 Planning Commission meeting.
Thank you.
District 5, RZ 2024-6, application by Tuckahoe Lands LLC requesting a proper amendment to rezoning case RZ 2022-4 for a left turn lane waiver on 14.298 acres at 12310 River Road on tax map numbers 641750 and 641075A. The property is zoned residential limited R1 with proffered conditions. The left turn lane is required by the county zoning ordinance, section 15360. The comprehensive plan designates this area as single-family residential, medium density.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. For the record, my name is Ray Cash. I'm Assistant Director of Community Development. We've all met before. As Ms. Morton stated, this is in District 5. It is a rezoning, but it's a proffer amendment, something a little unusual, but it's requesting specifically a left turn waiver. It's located, as was mentioned, on River Road. This was originally, we'll talk about it as we go through, it was rezoned a couple of years, about a year ago. This is located generally in the southeastern portion of the county, as said, along River Road. The property in the area, you can see it currently shows as undeveloped. There is the house here. There's some houses adjacent to here. It does show as two properties. The intent, of course, was zoned together as one. The zoning map does show this as residential, R1 limited, and there is agricultural. Generally on the screen, they're directly adjacent. One of the houses here is still agricultural, a little portion over here. So that's generally consistent with other development in the area of the R1. The comprehensive plan does designate this single-family residential medium density. This was determined to be in compliance with the comprehensive plan, which provides for one unit lots on average lot size of 1 acre, but this one is consistent with what's been approved recently. This was the exhibit that was approved with the previous plan. It does show 14 lots, generally an access here. As you notice on this plan here, there does show a right turn. There was a specific proffer condition, number 12, related to the taper. Other improvements on the site, there was also architectural provisions in addition to this conceptual plan. There's a 100-foot buffer generally along River Road. There's also 15-foot perimeter buffers that were established through the case. So what's before you tonight is really to amend Proffer 12 to obtain a waiver related to the left turn requirements under the zoning ordinance. No other changes. There's nothing else that's being offered up from the applicant tonight. The original case was approved for 14 single-family detached lots. Proffers included a conceptual plan of the said buffers, road dedication, cash proffer, and a right turn lane. Prior to the hearing before the board last year, the applicant did withdraw the waiver for a left turn. It had been discussed previously in the case. So by default, it would go to the requirement of a left turn lane. That's provided in 15360B1, provides for subdivisions, major subdivisions, which in the subdivision ordinance is defined as 5 or more lots, that access onto an arterial collector road. There is a provision in that same section of the code that the Board of Supervisors, through either a conditional use permit or a rezoning permit, may seek a waiver to the turn lane requirements, may grant a waiver to the turn lane requirements. There are certain factors that should be considered in doing so. They're listed up here on the screen, but things you would think that are related to why you would need a turn lane. Sight distance, grade changes, rear end crashes in the area, traffic volume, and the like. There was a community meeting held specifically related to this request in April 10th of this year. 10 citizens did attend, as well as Vice Chair Winfrey of the board and Member Lyle and Planning Commissioner Cosby. The comments were generally related to the issue, safety need for the left turn lane, left turn among determining factors in the original approval, and that 4 emails of opposition were received prior to the hearing. At the request of the board, staff went out and did site visits for this. I've visited the site, also county engineer and our transportation manager, Austin Goyne, visited the site most recently. We did this on Tuesday and Wednesday. The peak hour visit on 6/18 was done. We're talking about the peak hours. Now, when you think of traffic management, traffic impact analysis and the thing, you determine different peak hours. The evening peak hour is often the most busy for one, and so visited site between 4 and 6 on Tuesday. In addition, he performed 3 turn lane movements at different times to basically assess the movement, how it occurs, what's the delay, if there's any backing up behind his movement for the left turn lane, none was found. For this situation, I'll show you in this upcoming map, we had to use really where the ongoing sewer project is occurring. There is a construction entrance that is located here. This is the sewer project where the Utilities Department is doing an upgrade to the existing system. There is the existing driveway, which you'll see in the photos in a moment, that serve the existing house on the property here. And then the approximate location of the new proposed entrance for the applicant is over here, generally consistent with conceptual plan. So this is standing inside the existing driveway to the house, taking pictures looking east. As you can see, there's the barricades related to the construction site for the utility improvements that's ongoing. It's pretty good visual distance for the area. This is also looking west. I actually moved out to the roadway so you can make sure you saw the zoning sign in there. It's a pretty straight area, pretty good visibility going west as well. So another thing that's important is for a turn lane is really intersection, site distance, intersection site distance. So we did the on-site observation of that. We also evaluate the proposed distances, site distances based upon some Google Earth measurements. And apparently, determining this, we look at site distance west, you're really talking about 2,200 feet potential. You're talking about approximately site distance east, about 1,200 feet, which is actually pretty good and more than adequate in site distance. There are other developments in the area, a couple of those, and this is really thinking east of 288 along River Road. There are 5 major subdivisions within those. It's a mixed bag about turn lanes. The 2 larger subdivisions, West Oak at 89 and Randolph Square at 148, do have left turn lanes provided. They're actually shown here on this map. In red, I went in and highlighted the 2 that do have left turn lanes. They kind of frame this area. If you also notice from the aerial, if you notice from West Creek up to generally where to get to Randolph Square, in particular the Tuckahoe Lands area that's highlighted, it's a pretty straight stretch of road. So that's why it promotes a pretty good visibility and stopping distance. So the other thing that's evaluated is traffic generation. What's resulting from this residential development? That's all the part of the things we assessed when we looked at this originally to determine what its impacts are on the roadway. So generally, for a PM peak hour, the 14 homes would generate about 18 trips. And you're talking, again, in those peak hours. If you break those down, you also consider it's not all 18 at once, and they're not. It's hard to tell which is the enter and exit because it includes both. So what the analysis and consideration is that staff evaluated that. Let's consider that of those 18, 12 would be trips that are entering in the development during the peak hour, and then assume further that all those 12 trips are entering from the west, requiring the left turn lane. So again, that's a higher analysis, a little bit of worst case scenario. The VDOT manual also states regulation regarding 2 turn lanes. Basically, you determine where traffic volumes are high enough to warrant them. That's the industry standard for unsignalized intersections. Based on available data, the volumes at this point do not warrant a left turn lane or in the horizon that we typically look for to analyze impacts of development. So further, when we think about the analysis and think about those questions that I said, the factors that you need to look at or think about when you consideration, those aren't the only ones you're limited to. Really, it's a residential subdivision, so we don't expect high truck traffic, trailer traffic, or buses. For only 14 homes, you're not expecting a lot of high non-typical automobile traffic. There is a concept plan that does provide adequate internal site distance. There's 3 private schools in the area that generally go through along River Road. Their school day ends, according to their website, between 2 and 3. Probably hours of 4 to 5. Typically, 1:30 to 2:30 is when they get out of school. They cycle through the area during the time of the peak traffic. The posted speed limit is 5 miles an hour. We don't have an available speed study, but we did observe traffic generally in the area obeying the speed limit, plus or minus 5. When you're having a residential type road like this, where you have frequent residential developments, you also have a couple places where there's individual parcels directly related to this. People recognize that and drivers anticipate that people are making turn movements. When you're into a residential community, you expect people that are looking for their driveways. You're expecting people to turn to go into their residential neighborhood. So it's anticipated when you're driving. Again, the observations we looked at, apparently distance and roadway geometry did not appear to impact the development's ability for a safe entrance. It's also classified as a collector road. A collector road is intended to access residential areas, and so turn movements are expected as part of that and part of the evaluation when VDOT looks at the turn lane evaluations. And again, I just put the layout of everything we discussed one more time before that, and staff's available for any questions for this. Again, we were asked to go take a look at this and put forward, at least provide information to you. I know the applicant does have a presentation as well.
All right, Ray, I do have some questions. So the speed limit is 45. That was one of the ones I was wondering about. Do you have a recommendation, does the staff have a recommendation on this waiver?
I'll let Austin handle that.
So, yeah, thank you. Austin Goin, County Engineer for the record. Based on the analysis and the site observations, looking at both VDOT standards and the county code and the standards that are within that, it's been determined that the safety and operations on River Road and the entrance to the development will not be compromised if the waiver is approved. That's ultimately what the analysis pointed to.
All right, but you don't have a recommendation?
Typically, staff doesn't provide recommendations to the commission or the board, but just providing the results of the analysis.
All right. And so there are no VDOT requirements for a left turn lane?
Correct.
All right. So but it is within the county's ordinance or what?
Correct. The zoning ordinance 15-360 requires left turn lanes for all subdivisions of 5 lots or more.
Yet there are places that do not do that.
Correct.
Correct.
Correct. And that stems from that requirement used to be in the subdivision ordinance. We just did a deep dive on this, so it's fresh in my memory. And historically, the county relied on the VDOT warrants for turn lane determination, but that was changed in 2020 to the current standard.
So those other neighborhoods, those 5 other neighborhoods were prior to
Correct.
2020?
Correct. And at the time of their construction, they did not appear to warrant turn lanes at that time.
All right. But the county has an ordinance of 5 homes or more, which seems restrictive, very restrictive to me, but that is an ordinance within the
Correct.
county.
Correct.
Okay.
I mean,
Right, so there is a requirement that was put in 2020. We have had 2 waiver requests that have come forward since then. Both were approved by the board. I think part of that was the consideration previously that the board just wanted the opportunity to evaluate an application that came in to determine if there's other factors beyond just the straight warrant of VDOT that should be considered. Some of the factors we provided, to you in our presentation.
I have a question about the site distance. I don't know if we can go back to that slide real quick and look at
you want to look at the photos?
not the photos, but there we go.
All right.
Approximately 2,200 feet and approximately 1,300 feet.
Correct.
Is there, how do I want to say that, is there a best practice, or do either of those, that .24, is that throw up any red flags?
No, so the standard site distance that's required through the VDOT analysis is actually 500 feet for a 45-mile-an-hour road.
Okay.
I think the issue, one of the issues I have is the fact that it says 45, but every time I'm on River Road, everybody's going more than 45. And so, you're also looking at student drivers, people driving who are on the phone, all kinds of other issues in terms of safety. The staff have you looked at just the future safety? I mean, because obviously those schools are not going anywhere, so there's going to obviously be more students on top of those students, more younger drivers, and even, of course, the neighborhoods that exist, you're going to have things that's going to change within those neighborhoods. Kids who live in those neighborhoods are going to start driving. Maybe there's going to be older drivers. I mean, there's a lot of factors that's going to take place. So have you looked at those factors in terms of, it's easy to look at things in 2024, but I'm trying to look ahead of what will be in place, or how would River Road look in 2034?
So-
Go ahead of that.
So the applicant, as a part of their original rezoning case, provided a traffic impact analysis, or a TIA, which projected out to what's called a build year, which they assumed at that point to be 2025, which is when they expect to be fully built out. At that point, they've added in to not only background traffic, existing traffic, but added in a growth rate for the area, which is kind of determined over the regional scale. At that point, they applied the necessary growth rate plus their trips, and they still did not, at that time, projecting out 3 years or so, they did not trip the VDOT turn lane warrants with that data either.
Was there, or has there ever been a study that shows how much traffic is coming west during peak hours versus east?
There is information that shows that. We did not dive into that level of specificity for this analysis as far as the directional factor.
Yeah.
Ray, could I ask you a question? How many by rights are on this property?
Really kind of depends. The claim potentially, that would be up to 10. I believe it's, now, since it's been zoned, you're limited to what's in the proffered case without coming back through zoning. So it's a R1 zone property, so it can do whatever an R1 would allow. So the scenarios of by right, previous scenarios kind of go around. At one time, the applicant showed a potential for 12. That also predated the zoning. Evaluation, it would depend on, right now, they're locked into, and they need to develop the way the proffer state and the conceptual plan. So they would have to come back and rezone, take the property back
12.
down, right? So
But
at
at
this
that point, then none of these proffers would be in place. That would
Yeah,
be-
you'd have to go back to base, and if the number exceeded 5 lots that are being developed, we'd still be back at the left turn lane provision as well. What was presented last year, where the developer showed a potential of up to 12 lots, that's back when it was also split zoned R1 and A1. A2 rather. So, there was a specific configuration that you had to meet. So really, there's other considerations now with the zoning that currently has kind of go out the window. If it stayed at R1, if, let's say, the proffers disappeared and went back to R1, then it would have to comply whatever our standards are for that. Acre and a half lots that don't have water and sewer. I can't do the calculation on the top of my head if you think about that, but it would probably come around about 10 to 12 lots.
Thank you very much. The applicant would like to speak.
I believe we've got a PowerPoint. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. My name is Andy Conlon, here on behalf of Tuckahoe Lands to present to you, and trying not to repeat a lot of what Mr. Cash had provided, and thank you to Mr. Cash for that report. As he stated, this is about 14 acres, and you can see that we've marked here both the immediately adjoining subdivisions being Rivergate and Wickham Glen. I did get in my presentation, I think I'll have numbers that are slightly different, but to answer your question, we determined as part of the original zoning that we could get 12 lots. In the original zoning that was approved last year, we only asked for 14 lots. We originally had asked for 17 lots. We pulled that back down to the 14 lots based on some discussions with the county and the Board of Supervisors, and that was ultimately what was approved. As part of our approval request, we very originally had asked for no waivers, waivers on both the right and left turn lane, so we wouldn't have either one because they weren't justified pursuant to VDOT warrants. In discussion with the county, it was clear that we could put in, and we've always stated we could always meet the VDOT requirement for the right turn lane, and we said we'd go ahead and put that in. It was the left turn lane that we originally came before the Planning Commission twice, had retained that waiver request. At that time, when we approached the Board of Supervisors for the second time, one of the supervisors had asked,
have you done the engineering? Can you fit the left turn lane in? And the answer was, we had not done the engineering specifically because it didn't meet the warrants. It didn't meet the VDOT warrants. It was, at that point, 14 lots. It was, and I'll go over some of the other traffic study provisions. And the request said, would you withdraw that left turn waiver request and do the engineering and find out if you can make it fit and meet VDOT requirements? And that's the only reason why we withdrew that at that time. Not that we couldn't meet otherwise the standards set forth in the code or meet the standards by VDOT. It was because we didn't know at that time and we couldn't accurately project that to the supervisor. So this is the layout that was approved. Again, the 14 lots. Here's the color rendering that shows that, and really, we could have done 12 lots, but we did the 14 lots for the 2 additional lots and provided the proffered conditions, including the 100-foot buffer. And we also proffered the right turn lane meeting VDOT standards as required, as well as buffers, as you can see in the behind, and the back, on the left, and on the top, next to Rivergate and Wickham Glen. And of course, public water and sewer. We had a number of proffered conditions, again, which are not at issue here. The only question is, the only thing we're asking for, we originally thought, based on the ordinance that you saw, that we could apply for a conditional use permit. It was through the discussions of the county staff. They asked and had recommended that we do a proffer amendment, not a conditional use permit. So that's why we've asked for the proffer amendment. The only thing we're doing is adding in this request for the waiver at that time. That's the only question. We're not trying to trick anyone. I saw some email correspondence saying that we were trying to confuse the situation. I think this is a pretty simple request. We can't fit the left turn lane in, and I'm going to go over the reasons for why we do meet the county standards for this particular request. Well, I'm not sure what happened there, but somehow or other this doesn't show. Doesn't show up there. You can see both, well, that other one was a right turn maneuver that didn't show up, that shows the same type of chart where the right turn warrants nor the left turn warrants are actually met. This was actually based on 17 lots. As I said, we originally applied for 17 lots, and that's where our traffic study that was referenced by Mr. Goins was based on. The other thing that the traffic study was able to show, again, based on 17 lots, they did an analysis of a number of intersections, but most particularly at this one on the right side, on the upper right, was the one for the Wickham Glen and River Road intersection, and the second on the bottom left is the, at our subdivision, again, designated as a 17-lot subdivision. It's obviously going to be less. You can see the differences here, which are pretty nominal with respect to Wickham Glen Drive and our entranceway, which shows both the level of service being level of service A and level of service B, which are critical, but also showing the second delay at both those intersections at the AM and PM peak being almost identical between those 2 intersections. I think it's very relevant to the situation to show how will this function, is that it will function almost exactly like Wickham Glen. And you can see as well with respect to the queues, those are lengths, like for example, under Wickham Glen, the AM eastbound left and through is a 5-foot queue length. That's where someone has to wait for about 5 feet on the queue before going. You can see on the southbound left-right turn movement, it's 39 feet with a car length with the spacing being about 25 feet. So that's about a car and a half length. We're almost exactly, again, the same with respect to our entranceway, both with that eastbound left through movement and the left and right through movement. The actual summary at the end of the day of the study was that the traffic impact at these intersections, including at our intersection, is going to result in a 1/10 of a second delay, greater than we have today, that you see. And this is based on a 2025, based on the analysis, as Mr. Goins had described, and it includes our entrance at River Road. We also sent to you, and I don't have it up here, is the crash data that was determined by VDOT that showed between Rivergate and Randolph Square from May of 2016 to March of 2024, 8 years, it showed 5 accidents in this specific corridor, in which time period they also have had all these other subdivisions that are surrounding us. Here's the cross-section for both the right and left turn lanes. On the right side, obviously, is the right turn lane. I've got the entrance marked with the blue arrow heading up. You can see on the upper left, that's where our western property line is. And this is, I'm going to dive into this just a little deeper on both sides, but in order to meet the VDOT standards, we'd have to not only go to the adjoining landowner, but the landowner beyond them as well. And unfortunately, the right cross-section didn't show up for whatever reason, but the cross-section for the left turn lane, you can see here in a little bit more detail. This is not just a question of being able to put in specifically asphalt and just widen it and extend it. When you put in asphalt, you have to accommodate for stormwater, so we have to increase the ditch and the stormwater flows. But we also have two major utility lines, including power lines that are in here, as well as a gas line that would have to be moved as well. And that's one of the reasons that, based on the engineering, why we couldn't just make that determination a week before the zoning application was considered by the Board of Supervisors. We had to go in and take a look at all of this to figure out what the taper would be, but also what the impact would be by putting in that additional turn lane in order to accommodate this left turn. And one of the comments that was made as an opposition was said that we could have just designed this and just move it over and fit this left turn lane in. Again, we've looked at that. We have, and I think if I can go forward, you can see the entrance to Wickham Glen that's just to the onto the right. Not only do we have to maintain that or not only the site distance, but also maintain the distance between the VDOT required distances between access points. So it's not really just a matter of just sliding it over. That distance that we have for the left turn lane far exceeds what we have for the right turn lane. So we couldn't fit both of and meet physically the right turn lane and the left turn lane and still meet the VDOT requirements from that standpoint. As has been pointed out, and while I've got Rivergate at 64 lots, I think you showed it at 63 lots, and Wickham Glen at 22 lots, I think Mr. Cash had, we're pretty close. We're asking for 14 lots at this, and across the street at Lower Tuckahoe is 110 lots. None of those most immediately adjoining subdivisions have a left turn lane off of River Road, and it works for them, and it works on the property itself. We've already established that with these 14 lots that we've shown that it does not meet the VDOT warrants for the turn lane. It does not cause a delay. We're talking 1/10 of a second in 2025, trying to accommodate for background traffic as well as the existing traffic that's on the road and our traffic. We've already shown from a traffic accident standpoint having 5 accidents in this corridor in 8 years, and we literally cannot fit the left turn lane. It's consistent with these exact same subdivisions that are in the surrounding area that don't have a left turn lane. And finally, I would just point out that it does in fact have in the ordinance that we are required to have a left turn lane. But it also has in the ordinance a specific provision to allow for a waiver if you meet the standards. I think you heard staff, both in looking at a more technical standpoint under current conditions, that we do meet the standards that are set forth in the code. And we've also provided for meeting the standards, specifically being what's in the existing area, that it's a safe movement, and that it doesn't cause a delay. Otherwise, if we can't get this in, if we literally are required to put in this left turn lane, we can't meet the ordinance, which means we can't do the development, whether by right or by the fact that it was zoned. Whether we were by right with the 12 lots, we'd still have to meet this ordinance, and then that means that this land, which is in the comprehensive plan for residential, could not be built at that point. So with that, I would ask that you follow the staff's opinion with respect to the facts of not causing a delay or causing an unsafe maneuver, and ask for a recommendation to the Board of Supervisors. I'll be happy to answer any questions at this time.
All right, as you stated, this would not meet the ordinance. Now, you say it meets the standard, and by that you are talking about the
standards for the waiver, which is also in the ordinance. The ordinance allows for a waiver of the turn lane requirements if you meet those specific standards, talking about site distance and grade changes, frequency of crashes, the volume of traffic, and the speed limit.
Okay.
I mean, there's some specific, and that's why we had our traffic study done. I mean, for 14 lots, at the time 17 lots, it's pretty unusual to do that kind of traffic analysis, but we did at that time. And of course, staff has done their own just most recently within the last week. So we believe we have met the standards that are set in the ordinance to allow for a waiver in specific circumstances, because it's a blanket requirement, but there has to be an exception in there, which the ordinance does provide for, which we think we've met far and above.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you. I now open the floor for public comment, please. You'll have 3 minutes to speak and come up and introduce yourself.
Mr. Chairman, members of the Planning Commission, my name is George Mahoney. I live at 325 Wickham Glen Drive. I'm a member of the board of our community association. As you've seen, Wickham Glen is right next to the planned Lockhart Green development. We filed written comments, as I hope you've seen, requesting the waiver request be denied. I won't repeat those comments here, But I would point out that it's a good thing that the staff came and looked at this property in the last couple of days. Unfortunately, when they came, school's out. So they did not see the kids driving up and down this road. They did not note that the kids that are driving up and down this road are not doing it during the school day. They're doing it because they're going to athletic fields, long after the time that they talked about. I want to make one larger point, though. If the county were to give the developer here what he's looking for, it would be the same as a developer doing a special favor for the developer to help him mask his own carelessness in agreeing to put the left turn lane in order to get the Board of Supervisors' approval. The county certainly does not want to create a precedent like that. It would undermine the very concept of having an effective planning process. The county also wouldn't want to gain a reputation for helping out fast-talking developers who've been careless or who want to cut corners after gaining an approval, maybe just so they can save some money. Rather, the county should insist that developers play carefully by the rules in place at the time that they seek the approval for their developments. That requires a denial of this waiver request, and it's particularly important here when the other side of the equation would be diminished road safety along the River Road corridor. So we believe the waiver request should be denied, and thank you very much. I'm happy to answer any questions if you all have any of those, but I appreciate the opportunity to speak.
Mr. Chairman, members, I'm Ted Lindhart, 13282 Kelston Court in the Rivergate subdivision. I'm here with two hats on my own, but first and foremost is the statement from the Rivergate Community Association Board of Directors, categorically opposed again to this waiver request. A couple of just comments, and our position in Rivergate has been put in an email and sent to all of you all that you can reflect on. Not like George, I'm not going to ask you to reflect on all the facts and all of the issues that have been going on now for years while we've looked at this project. You've looked at this project and turned it down previously, and supervisors overruled your opinion on this. This is not an issue in a vacuum. We have gone through the buffers, the egress, the side road issues, the setback issues, the lot size issues, and the impact on the comprehensive plan. Primarily, the issue for you today is this is an economic issue put up against a safety issue. It's black and white. We have an ordinance that says, except under unusual circumstances that you have in your control, this is a safety issue. Several things in the slides were misleading. Rivergate and some of the other subdivisions don't have left turn lanes because they weren't mandated in 1998. So that list of yeses and nos needs to be brought up to date to whether they were required or not. They are now required. Now, we can debate whether it's 5 or 12 or 14, but the law is the law. If we're going to treat everybody equitably to do this, we shouldn't be giving a developer a back door so he can make money on his project because he's miscalculated it, how much setback he could have and how many houses he could in, how small the lots could become to make his numbers work. It shouldn't be coming to you all to help him make that when we've got the safety of the kids going to 3 schools up and down River Road. You all know the area. I've lived on that road for 55 years. Can cite the number of near collisions, which were not on your chart, that we've had on River Road where people slammed on brakes, kids perhaps not as attentive as they should be, all the athletic fields that are out there, off Blair Road now, the 3 schools, the expansion of Benedictine, all of this plays into this no left-hand turn. My time is gone, but I do want you to be aware that we remain categorically opposed to this for the simple reason River Road is unsafe enough without you all deviating from the rules. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Jeff Liu. I live at 323 Wickham Glen. I just want to echo all of those comments. And speaking personally, in terms of the traffic studies that they've done, I don't believe it. They're saying the peak traffic hours at between 4 and 6, but I urge you to come out in the morning. It is dangerous to pull out of these developments now in the morning. There's so much traffic, kids going to school, all these construction vehicles, all these work vehicles coming into service these developments. I moved in 2009, 2010 to Wickham Glen, and it was vastly different then. You could basically pull out of our neighborhood with, blinders on, and 99% of the time you'd be fine. Now you actually have to wait, and sometimes you're cutting it very close just because you have lines of traffic. It's very difficult to pull out of these. So I think it's a safety issue. And, now, River Road isn't getting less busy. It is getting more busy. There are more developments, there are more kids going to school, more kids using these fields. Again, 100%, I think it's a safety issue. So I think the developer just needs to figure it out, but I don't think we should compromise on the safety of people who are going to live in that neighborhood, people who are going to live in the surrounding neighborhoods, and people who are just traveling down River Road. Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay. We'll close the public comment. What do you think?
I've got a question. Was there any other opposition made by anyone else in other HOAs that do not adjoin this property?
It's my belief that the homeowner association comment was Rivergate, and I believe also Wickham Glen did as well, but nothing from outside the area, at least for this case. I know there was concern during the original case from, as people spoke from other neighborhoods in the area.
Thank you.
Well, I've said before, and I'll say it again, I think in terms of just the safety issue, not just in 2024, but what we have to look forward to as a board and as citizens, and even as staff, how are things going to look, 5 years from now, 10 years from now? Because if anything, it's going to change, and it's going to get worse. It never gets better. There's always more people, always more cars, and there's always more situations. I've read through this. I've read through citizen emails. I was at the meeting myself where things were quite heated, per the passion of the residents in Rivergate and the other communities against this. And, and I've heard what the attorney said for the client as well. But, when you look at the end of the day, I never heard anybody say, well, we could have looked at, or maybe we should back up and see whether somehow we could do a left turning lane. It just seemed to be, well, in this particular case, we just can't do it. And so I'm not sure why it wasn't, I keep hearing the word we did a deep dive into these things, but, how come there was not a deep dive, if you will, into can we really do a left turning lane? I haven't heard that. And so, again, my major concern with River Road and a lot of the other roads in Goochland County that are smaller roads. I mean, we don't have major, large thoroughfares. We have smaller roads. I live on a smaller road that is, pretty much 100% yellow line all the way down. I mean, I think just one little stretch has the dashes where you can pass. But even that is extremely dangerous with the tree overhangs and things like that, and deer popping out and everything else that takes place. So my position is, the level of safety, not only in 2024, but, where are we or where we will be in the next 5, 7, or 10 years from now.
I think our traffic expert said that they did look at that, and there wasn't a great growth, that they're considering traffic for the next 5 years. Correct?
So the analysis that they provided, again, with their original rezoning case, looked out to 2025, which is now next year.
Right. So how about past 25?
They did not provide analysis past 2025.
But on the applicant side, all the other metrics are met, right? VDOT does not warrant this, right?
Correct. VDOT does not warrant the left turn lane in this case.
Sightlines are good?
Yes,
Straight and
yes.
long? And traffic, I mean, 14 houses, I mean, not a lot.
Well, I'm sympathetic to that point, but I also know that the county has recently said that if you have more than 5 houses, you need a left turn lane. So,
But there's also a place for an ordinance for a waiver. If he make.
Always,
If he meets all of these other metrics.
So in peak hours, the estimate is that there's 18 cars turning in this development.
So the PM peak, it's estimated that there will be, let me make sure I get the numbers right here, 18 total trips in and out of the development. And based on the data that the traffic impact analyses have to go through and the manuals that they have to go through, 63% of those will enter the subdivision at the PM time, coming home from work, and that is ultimately 12 total trips, spread out over a 2-hour period.
So 12 total trips going in, but that doesn't account for how many people are actually turning left in there.
That's
Right.
it. For the point of this analysis, we assumed all 12 will turn left into the subdivision to provide a worst-case scenario for our purposes when we took a look at it.
Okay.
You know, I don't travel River Road as much as maybe others do. I'm on Fairgrounds 2-3 times a day, and I can tell you the safest places on Fairgrounds are where there's a left-hand turn lane. I've gone to the athletic fields at, on Blair Road, and you're not talking about 50 kids sitting there playing soccer. There's hundreds of them, and there's buses, and it's just jam-packed. And I have to imagine that most of those are going to be using that River Road area. I think it's a safety concern. I do. I think about future growth. If we would have thought a little bit more, you know, if Fairground would have been like built out a little bit better, think of all the accidents that it could have been avoided. I do. I worry about the safety of it.
Okay.
Mr. Pituk, I just noticed we didn't actually officially close the public
I'm
hearing,
sorry.
so let's do that, just for the minutes. Thanks.
Public comment.
Thank you for letting Mr. Gordon go.
Yeah.
Excuse me?
Is that public comment?
All right. I think the applicant's proved his case. I think that the sightlines are good, the traffic is reasonable. VDOT is not demanding this, and he has a right to ask for a waiver. So therefore, I move that the commission recommend approval of proper amendment RZ 2024-0006 at 12310 River Road as presented.
I second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Can we get a roll call vote for clarity? Mr. McLaughlin?
Aye.
Mr. Cosby?
No.
Mr. Patuk?
Yes.
Ms. Kowalski?
No.
Mr. Kimmerly?
no.
The motion to recommend approval is defeated.
Yes, did you want to say that it will be moving to the board's agenda?
This case will be scheduled for a public hearing before the Board of Supervisors on August 6th, 2024, with a recommendation of denial from the Planning Commission per Section 2.6.3 of the Planning Commission bylaws and rules of procedure.
Thank you. Any old business?
No old business. Other business is director update.
Good evening, members of the commission. I'm Jamie Sherry, Director of Community Development. As you can see on the screen, we have a very active caseload. I was going to give you a quick update as to what's to come. So there are several cases and ordinance amendments that will be in front of the Board of Supervisors on July 2nd. In District 1, we have Bandits Ridge, which is it currently have a conditional use permit for a public place of assembly. They are proposing to amend their CUP to add a winery and increase the number of events per day and to allow outdoor music until 7 p.m. Also in District 1, we have Mr. Hemstock, who is requesting a CUP for a gunsmith shop. For the record, he has removed his outdoor shooting range. This is what was heard at the Planning Commission last month. Mr. Dandridge, in District 2, he is requesting a conditional use permit for a small contractor building, storage building. We have RHVA LLC. This is the request to rezone in District 4, a property from R3 to B3 for an office building. We also have Access Management. This is an ordinance amendment that is a countywide ordinance amendment, and this would revise the zoning ordinance and subdivision ordinance, a portion of both of those, as it pertains to road requirements. And then the stormwater and ENS that is on the screen. This is something that the state has mandated, that localities combine two separate permits into one permit. This is not going to be going to the Planning Commission. This is not in the zoning or subdivision ordinance, so this will be going directly to the board. But I did want to bring it to your attention since it does relate to community development. Then looking ahead for the Planning Commission in July 18th, there are also several cases as well as ordinance amendments that will be before you at a public hearing. In District 2, Flemion, this is a request for a conditional use permit for a small contractor storage building. Ms. Thurston in District 3 will be requesting a renewal of a short-term rental unhosted. Luck Company in District 4, they are requesting a CUP for overburden placement and stone crushing facilities. In District 2, this is a subdivision exception, so this will be an action item before the Planning Commission that will not go to the Board of Supervisors. He is requesting an exception to have a road requirement of a public road be a private road. There's also a consideration of a countywide ordinance amendment for floor area ratio. That's what the FAR is on the screen. This is a consideration to remove the floor area ratio from industrial and commercial zoning districts. And then lastly, a floodplain ordinance amendment as well as an adoption of the floodplain maps. This is a process that has been going on for a number of years that has been vetted through both the state and federal government, and also we included numerous opportunities for citizens who are impacted by the floodplain to participate. That will be before you next month. And then, oh, it's not working for some reason. Can you all advance me to the next screen?
When you say adopt firm map, what is firm?
So, I'm sorry, so that's the flood insurance rate maps. So just for the public's note, for those who are still in the audience or listening from home, the short version of it is that Goochland County since 2008 has participated in a federal process that, recognizes that our floodplains and it publishes maps to let people know. And they're able to get some federally funded flood insurance as a result of it. So what is We do have one community meeting coming up, and I think they're going to try and get it on the screen so those at home can actually read it as well. But TC Energy, which is Columbia Gas, they have a transmission station here in the county that's located in District 3. They are proposing to amend their conditional use permit to add an additional building, which is one of the requirements of their original CUP. Any kind of expansion needs to go before you and the board. This is going to be on the 10th. I think it says the 6th there. I apologize. It is actually on the 10th of July. That will be at 6 p.m., and that's at St. Matthew's United Methodist Church. So, actually, nobody sees the screen because
For July so far?
I'm sorry, yes, that is, right now, that is the only one that we have. Again, we do have a very active caseload, pre-application caseload, so there will be more, I'm sure, coming.
Okay.
All right, any questions? And thank you all.
Motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
All in favor? Aye.
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 We're adjourned.